Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell. I'm your host Mark Decano, and in this podcast I talk to the people in comedy about what comedy means to them and ask them to answer life's biggest question. What is comedy? Is it the purest form of art? Is it a carefully calculated scientific process? Or is it just an excuse to avoid getting a real job? I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 1,500 comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. If you like to hear what comedians have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is a stand-up comedian originally from New Jersey, now a proud citizen of the UK. Not only did she take her debut hour of stand-up comedy to the Edinburgh Fringe this year, but she also hosts one of the friendliest comedy nights in London. It's stand-up comedian Leslie Gold. Well, why don't we dial the clock all the way back then? What's your earliest recollections of comedy in your life?
A very early one. We're going to go super early.
Yeah.
My dad, my beloved dad, who died when I was a kid, as anyone who's seen my show will know because I bang on about it. But my dad taught me when I was very young. He taught me, maybe like 4 or 5 years old, taught me all the words to Abbott and Costello's Who's on First. And we used to run those lines back and forth at each other. Like, I don't know how I had the capacity to learn that when I was so young, but it is one of my earliest and most beloved memories of my dad.
Yeah. Was it your dad's love of that sketch or of comedy that instilled a love of it in you? Or was it just that connection with that one piece?
I think both. My dad did love a laugh, and my mom likes to tell me that dad always wanted to be a comedy writer, but never quite got to it because he died young. And so, I think dad definitely was the laugher in the family. My mom is, bless her, I love her to bits, but she could find the negative in any situation. Like genuinely, if I told her I'd won the lottery, she'd be worried about people coming out of the woodwork wanting to be my friend, like that kind of thing. Whereas dad was always quick to find a laugh.
Yeah.
And I definitely got that from him.
Were there other influences that sort of came into your life as you started on your own journey?
My own journey.
Your own journey.
My own journey took a very long time to happen. One of my earliest memories was wanting to be a performer. At the time, I thought I wanted to be an actor. Actually, I would have used the word actress, which I now dislike because it's unnecessarily gendered. But I put aside that dream of being an actor because it was a long time ago, and I looked at the world around me and realized that I was never going to be the kind of pretty person that gets acting jobs. And also, I could not sing. And to my childish perspective, as a very small person, you had to either, as a female actor, you had to either be pretty or be able to sing. Bear in mind, this was around the time Grease came out. So we're talking Olivia Newton-John. We're talking Charlie's Angels with Farrah Fawcett. This was what I saw in the world around me. And neither of those was ever going to be me. So I just kind of put that aside. And I didn't actually do much with comedy really until decades. Many decades. I did briefly join a sketch troupe in my 20s. I was kicked out for dating the wrong guy, which was funny in its own way. And I didn't do my first stand-up set until I was 47 years old.
What was it that made you want to do stand-up then?
Well, I always kind of wanted to do it. I just never had the confidence to do it. I was a very unconfident, introverted, anxious person for most of my life.
Yeah.
And but I've always loved comedy. I've always thought if you have a choice and one of your options is laughing, that's the option to go for. Like, I don't understand where people are like, oh, I don't really like comedy. What's wrong with you? Like, life will throw all kinds of shit at you, and you can either laugh or you can cry. And I know which one I want to do every fucking time. Right. But it took me a long time, and a lot of things happened in my life that made me realize that I wasn't happy being the introvert I was born as. And so I taught myself to be an extrovert, but it still took decades to become confident to the point that 5 years ago, when a friend said, I'm putting on a charity gig, and it's a comedy night, and do you want to have a go? Because I know you like comedy. And I went, yeah, I'd love to do that. I'll do it once. I'll cross it off my bucket list. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, that was 5 years and 600 gigs ago. And I just never stopped since then.
Yeah. So how was that first gig? What was it like stepping out on stage as a stand-up for the first time?
Oh my God. It was the most fun I've ever had. It was great. It was so bizarre and wonderful. And so when my friend said, "Hey, we're doing this thing, do you want to do it?" I'll admit, I was drunk at the time this conversation happened. And that probably helped me say yes. And I'm not condoning, et cetera, whatever. But I went home that night and I opened my laptop and I just typed for like an hour, just thoughts that weren't anything. But I had 6 weeks between the time this conversation happened and the date of the gig.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 6 weeks, I looked at what I'd written and I went back to it and said it out loud for the first time to my partner and just played with it. And it was about 2 weeks in before I thought to ask the guy who'd given me the gig how long a time I should be aiming for. Because I knew nothing. I knew nothing. And he clearly didn't know that much either, because he said, "Oh, 10 minutes. Nobody does their first set at 10 minutes. It's usually 5.
Yeah.
But I was like, "Oh, 10, that's fine." And so I did 10 minutes and it was okay, you know. It wasn't, I thought it was going to be really bad. I thought I'd be lucky if I got a laugh or two. But people listened to what I was saying and they laughed in the places that I hoped they would laugh.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. I had never done anything creative before that was mine. And it felt like finding part of me I hadn't known existed.
Yeah.
That sounds pretentious, but it's true.
Yeah. So what happened from there on then? Did you have the bug? Did you cram in as many gigs as possible, or did you just wait then for the next person to invite you out?
Well, I figured if I waited another 47 years, it would be a long time. So the first thing I did was ask my friend who'd booked that gig how I go about getting other gigs. And they directed me to some Facebook groups, which I joined.
Yeah.
And then I did my first gig, like the first gig that wasn't booked by someone I knew, where and it was a bringer gig in London, because that's a thing. And I thought, oh, I'll give this a go and we'll see. Maybe it was just a really friendly room before. So that was a month after my first gig.
Right.
And from that was September 2019. And then I was like, do you know what? Maybe I can gig like twice a week. Oh, that's a lot. Now that's not a lot. At the time, that seemed like a lot. And I just started doing that a lot. And then I had my first paid gig on March 13th, 2020. And then the world fell apart.
Yeah.
The world kind of ended for a bit.
Yeah.
And everything went to Zoom. And then I did a lot of gigs on Zoom. I know everyone hates Zoom gigs, and to be honest, I'm not the world's biggest fan of them, but it kept my oar in during the pandemic. And then there was something that happened that I don't know if I'd have stuck with it if it hadn't. It was a terrible thing that happened. So warning, tiny bit of trauma. The first week of lockdown, my dog died.
Oh.
My beloved dog, who I'd had for 12 years and who was just the best dog that's ever lived in the history of the planet. I'm not exaggerating. She was fantastic. And I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
Of course I was. And because of that, when a booker from the comedy scene that I knew from before messaged me like a few days later and said, "I'm going to try a Zoom gig. Do you want to have a go?" I reached for that like it was, a lifeline, because it was something I could focus on. Because I was just so missing my dog.
Yeah.
And we were stuck in a house where there should be a dog and there was no dog. And so I just reached for that as a thing I could focus on that wasn't about my grief.
Yeah.
And I think if I hadn't done that first gig, I probably never would have done Zoom gigs. But I did a lot of Zoom gigs. I did So You Think You're Funny on Zoom. And yeah, so I was lucky, I think, in a way. Like, not lucky because I was, in a grief place, which is never fun, but
yeah,
it was fortunate that I had something to focus on that wasn't that, and that it was a thing that was such a positive force in my life.
Yes.
And by the time we came out of lockdown, I was like, get me back on stage.
So you mentioned So You Think You're Funny there.
Hmm.
Semi-finalist?
Yeah, somehow.
But you've done other competitions since. You've entered things like you've done Funny Women, West End, a bunch of things.
I've done a bunch of things. I've not done better than sort of finalist in a couple of things.
Yeah.
I really don't like competitions. I don't know why I keep signing up for them, to be honest. Well, I did So You Think You're Funny because their rules are very specific that you can only do it in the first year
Yes.
of performing. And I thought, if I don't do this now, I won't be able to. And I was so naive because I thought everyone would follow those rules, and not everyone does. There were a few people in my rounds of So You Think You're Funny that really should not have been there,
Right.
but whatever. And also mine got delayed because I was originally supposed to do it in May 2020.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that didn't happen. And when it finally did happen, it was in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And they combined 2 years, and all the heats were on Zoom, and the semifinal was on Zoom. And it's bizarre. And maybe I did better in So You Think You're Funny because I had more Zoom gigs under my belt than a lot of people.
Right.
So maybe I wouldn't have done as well in real life competition. I don't know. Competitions are, I don't understand why I sign up for them. I hate them. They're awful. They don't, the potential to have anything good come out of them is very slim.
Mm-hmm.
Some I do, like the West End New Act. I did that the first year that was on. That's run by Steve McLean, who is a genuinely good egg.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it because Steve was running it, and he's a good human, and I wanted to be part of that.
Yeah.
And that was good. And I did well in that. I was named one to watch in that, which was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year I did the West End New Old Act,
Mm-hmm.
also run by Steve. And that actually does have something to say for it, because if you do well in that, then you get stage time at Edinburgh, which is hard to come by early in your career.
Sure.
Especially for like the new act people. So it's, that's pretty decent as these competitions go. But some of them, I don't know. It sounds like sour grapes because I don't do well in them, but I just, I'm a storytelling comic, and
Yeah.
maybe it takes a few minutes for people to decide if they like me or not. I don't know.
Do you not have a competitive streak in you?
Competitive's a funny word because there's two real meanings of competitive, right? There's enjoying the actual competition of something.
Mm-hmm.
That means you're competitive. And there's needing to win.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as the youngest of three people in a highly dysfunctional family, I don't need to win, because if I did, I'd be very disappointed. I do enjoy like good-natured competition. I enjoy taking part in, but like, I think the word competitive is used a lot to mean someone who's like, I'm going to be upset if I lose. And I don't think that's me.
Yeah.
All I want is a fair shake.
Yeah. So you mentioned Edinburgh a minute ago, and obviously this year you took your debut hour.
Yeah.
Tell me about the experience of doing a full month of your first hour show.
On the whole, it was great. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Most days.
Yeah.
Everything everyone says is pretty much true. It's a roller coaster. It's a marathon, not a sprint. There's good days, there's bad days, there's days you just want to go, what am I even doing with my life? Like, how have I got to this point? I had one day when I had decent audience numbers in, I had like 14 people in, which is good for me, for an unknown quantity up there in a reasonably small room, but 12 of them just silently blinked at me for the entire hour. It was the longest hour of my life. And in a way, I'd rather just the two people who were actually engaged with what I was saying. I'd kind of have preferred to perform just to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy to take the money off the other people.
Yeah.
It's really hard because you put everything you've got into writing this, this show, this story, my story was really personal. It's about me. It's about my identity. I have lots of different identities. It sounds like I'm committing fraud, but I just mean like I tick a lot of boxes, you know. I'm an immigrant. I'm Jewish, but I'm an atheist. I'm American, but I'm British. I'm all these things that don't fit easily into one identifier. And so my show is largely about that. And it's also about my lovely dad, who I mentioned earlier, who died when I was young. And obviously that had a huge impact
Yeah.
on my entire life, as it would for anyone, I
Yeah.
think. So my show was really personal and meant a lot to me. I put a lot into it. I think everyone does. I don't think anyone takes doing a full hour show very lightly,
Yeah.
or, you know, if they do, fair play to them. But I put a lot into it. And so it's hard to see someone not engaging with that.
Yeah.
I had my first ever walkout. Oof, it's like a dagger in the heart. But you know, maybe my show is not for everyone, and that's okay. I don't think it's, you know, it's not the edgiest show in the world. It's not going to set the world on fire, but it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And the comments I got from a lot of my audiences meant a lot to me too. I had people telling me that they felt that they related to the way I talk about my family, made them feel things about their family, which was really nice.
Yeah.
I had one guy, this big burly dude who looks like he spends a lot of time in the gym. He came to the show and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "You know what? He said, I felt really quite emotional there at the end." And it was lovely, and he meant it. He was sincere, and it meant something to him. And in a way that I never quite expected. That meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I'm really lucky. I know a lot of people had a real struggle at Edinburgh this year. The numbers seem to have been down. I was very fortunate that I didn't have to cancel any shows. I had audiences every day. Most of them were pretty great. Some were blinkers. Some left. But on the whole, I had a really good experience, and I count myself really fortunate for that.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is also that I was very lucky to get the Keep It Fringe funding this year,
Yes.
which 180 acts got out of the whole Fringe. So when I applied for it, I was like, "There's no way I'm getting this," because they weren't entirely clear on what the criteria was they were looking for, to be honest. It was a little bit like, I don't know exactly what they're after, but I can only represent myself honestly and see what happens. And my pitch was that I felt, it's going to sound, or I don't know how it's going to sound. I felt invisible for most of my life. And it took me decades, literally decades, to figure out that this comedian persona is truly an authentic part of who I am. And it took me forever to get to this point. And I don't feel I have time to waste anymore. Like, this is who I want to be. This is who I am. There's something true about this comedy thing that resonates with me. And I made that the basis of my pitch for me getting the funding, is that I couldn't really afford to go up there and not work during the day. And I couldn't afford to get any promo. I don't have an agent. I don't have PR. And what the funding did for me was it enabled me to be more visible. So I got a couple of big posters outside my venue, and I was able to pay a couple of flyers to work with me to get bums in seats for my show. And that doesn't sound like the be all end all of the world, but it made my show happen in a way that it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I couldn't have afforded to do that otherwise. So yeah, I'm really lucky.
Yeah. You said that your show talks about identity and about being like American and British and Jewish and atheist. And there you talked a minute ago about you identifying as a comedian now. So
Yeah.
is your stage identity, the person we see on stage, is that the real you that we're seeing now, or is that a character that you play on stage?
That is really me, but it's like a version of me. It's completely authentic, but it's slightly elevated, slightly amplified version of who I really am and who I've always wanted to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it is entirely authentic. And it's funny because in a way, this comedy thing has helped me realize who I want to be off stage as well. I dress a little bit differently now than I did when I first started doing comedy.
Mhm.
I have what's been described as a look, which I'm good with. Um, it's a look. There's not usually a qualifier to it. I don't know if people are saying it's a weird look or a good look or a bad look. I don't know, but it's mine.
Mm.
And people have started to notice that, I guess. And I just feel like I'm authentically communicating who I really am,
Mm.
but the on stage bit of it is just a little bit amplified.
Yeah. So I mentioned a minute ago about the inspirations that you had. Are there people you've seen now who continue to inspire you? Are there any people that you saw when you were starting out that you received wisdom from in any shape or form?
Yeah, loads.
Hmm.
I've been really lucky, I think, in lots of ways. One of the things is I run my own show, and because of that, I've been able to work with some acts that are way further up the old comedy ladder than me. And that's given me a broader network than I'd have otherwise. And
Mm.
so I was able to work with Esther Manito, who gave me some directorial notes for my show. She didn't like direct the full show, but
Mm.
we met a couple of times and she gave me directorial notes, which were incredibly helpful. And I rate her as a comic so highly. She's
Yeah.
such a gifted storyteller.
Mm.
And when she's on stage, there is not a single person in the room who can ignore her or fail to notice what she's saying and how she's doing it. She is an incredible performer.
Yeah.
I could watch her and listen to her all day long. So when she said she'd be able to help me with some notes, I was like, yes, please. And they were incredibly helpful. She's very insightful as well. Um, she's not the only one I worked with. There's a friend of mine, David Ian, who's a comedian as well,
Hmm.
and he gave me some early notes, which was great. Um, I did a preview in London, and I asked people who attended to leave anonymous feedback notes,
Hmm.
which helped. That was only 2 weeks before Edinburgh, so some of those got put into play quite late in the game. But I mean, my partner is my biggest sort of first port of call for opinions on all things.
Yeah.
A, because I trust him implicitly. Um, and I, I can say the most random shit to him, and he'll tell me if it's funny, if there's something in it, if he doesn't understand it, if it doesn't make any sense. And he's British as well. So there's some things where I can go to him and go, is this a thing? Like, did you know what this is? Does
Mm.
this frame of reference work? And he'll tell me. Most of the time he's bang on. Once or twice I've been like, I think I'm going to go with it anyway, and it's worked out for whatever reason. But, well, there was one thing early on. I had a bit that I did that required the audience to know who Ren and Stimpy were.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't even Ren and Stimpy. I'm wrong. It was Pinky and the Brain. I'm mixing up my cartoons.
Yeah.
It was Pinky and the Brain. And I was on my way to a gig, and I thought about changing a line I had, and it would require knowing Pinky and the Brain. Do you know Pinky and the Brain?
I'm aware of
Okay.
it.
And I messaged Martin. I said, do you know this reference? And he was like, not really. He's like, I'm aware of who they are, but I don't know the line that you're
Yeah.
quoting. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna try it. I said, I'll go to this gig, I'll try. It was a low stakes gig, nothing ventured, nothing gained kind of thing. I
Yeah.
tried it and it killed, right? And it became part of my set for a while. And what I realized after that is that he is a tiny bit too old to have got the reference. But there's an age range for that reference that starts between my age and his age and goes all the way down to about 30. So everyone in that range kind of gets it. People, and that's enough. That's like a critical mass in most rooms, unless you're playing to a bunch of 25-year-olds.
Yeah.
Most enough people will get the joke that it works.
Yeah.
So either, as long as there's enough people sort of over 25 and under 55, you're fine. That's the only time in 5 years of going, does this work? Where his opinion hasn't actually borne out. So yeah, I trust him a lot. He's not a comedian, but it's a shame because he's funnier than me.
A lot of comedians say that about their partners.
Do they?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I think you have to have a good sense of humor to be the partner of a comedian.
You grew up American, and of course, as a comedian, you are now a British citizen as well.
Yeah.
So, how did growing up with comedy in the US differ from performing comedy in the UK? Because performing and watching are two different things, but the US and UK are two different things. So,
Well, it's interesting because I've never performed in the States, and I don't know how that would go. Part of me thinks they would not like to cut my jib. But I say there's 300 million of them. There's a lot of opinions over there, right?
Oh yeah.
But I grew up with watching Saturday Night Live and listening to Bob Newhart records and not knowing that Bill Cosby was a dangerous predator. And and so I grew up, I always loved comedy. I always loved watching comedy and comedy acting. One of these days, I am going to write my sitcom. I just have to sit down and do that. But I've always loved the British sense of humor. Not that there's one, but I've always loved British humor as well. I'm not, I don't call myself an Anglophile because most Americans who call themselves Anglophiles are people who have like a commemorative plate with Princess Diana on it, and that is not my vibe.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a royalist at all. But I grew up reading a lot of British authors, listening to a lot of British music, and watching British comedy. So, like Monty Python and the like, mainly Monty Python, if I'm honest. But I've lived in the UK for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And so I've consumed a lot of comedy from all over the world. And it's funny, because there's this idea that the British sense of humor and the American sense of humor are different. There are people who have told me many times that Americans don't get sarcasm, that Americans don't get irony, that the American sense of humor is just plain different. And I'm going to argue that's not true. And in fact, a few years ago, like 15 years ago, I was briefly in an amateur dramatic society. Because I always wanted to perform, and that was as close as I thought I could get for a while. Anyway, we used to have these like monthly meetings, and everyone would take it in turns to have a theme. And I was the only American in the group, a bunch of British people, and this was out in Hampshire, so in a much more homogenous, much more white place. It was very white. It was very middle class. It was very skewed older, right? And I was the only person in the group. They were lovely people, but I was the only person in the group that didn't quite fit the same demographic. And I just heard one too many times, oh yes, but of course, American sense of humor is different. So I decided one time I would take charge of this. And we had these monthly meetings where one person would like set a theme, and then you do like readings and act outs and all these things. So I set the theme of American Comedy Night, and I went and found all these scripts, things like Lucille Ball, best physical actor of all time, I would say, one of the most inspiring people, incredible actor. But I found scripts from Saturday Night Live, from Lucille Ball, from Frasier, from all these things, from Cheers, all these American programs. And I gave them to my colleagues in this group to read out, and I assigned different parts to everyone. And it culminated at the end of the night with Who's on First by Abbott and Costello, what I would argue is the best sketch ever written, or at least tied with Four Candles. Okay. But we did this whole evening of American comedy, and every single person in that room, every British person in that room went, oh yeah, actually, you're right. That's really funny. And I do think that sense of humor is a human thing, not a cultural thing. Culture affects it, obviously. But I don't think that there is an American sense of humor that is distinct from everyone else's. I think we all find things that are funny. I think it's hilarious that every ethnicity I'm aware of thinks that their mothers are the ones who are, when are you going to get married and when are you going to do this? And it's universal, but we like to think of it as being part of a tribe, and I don't think it is.
Yeah. Do you still watch comedy and do you still see it in the same way? Do you watch it as a comedian?
I watch it as a comedian now. Sometimes I wish I could just go back and just watch it. But when I see something that's really well written, I can enjoy it, but I can also kind of marvel at the skill that went into it.
Yeah.
Obviously everyone probably talks about Hannah Gadsby, but the amount of skill on show in her shows is incredible. It's just another level. This Edinburgh, one of the shows that impressed me the most was Sam Lake. His show was just perfect. I don't think he could improve it at all. He told this beautiful story using lots of visual cues as well, in a way that kept you laughing the whole way through, but came to a point that had some real emotion, genuine, authentic emotion behind it.
Yeah.
And you just got carried along on this during this show in the most joyful, celebratory way.
Yeah.
While laughing your ass off. And to see that and to understand a tiny bit of the skill that goes into creating a show like that, that I aspire to be able to do at some point, is profoundly fascinating to me.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about taking your debut show to Edinburgh, but what has, in more broad terms, what has your festival experience as a whole been like?
As a whole, I don't know that I've been to enough festivals to really speak to that as any kind of authority. But for me, as a comedy fan, I love it. I love it. So this Edinburgh, I did my show 24 times. I did guest spots 29 other shows. And then separate to that, I saw 75 shows of all different types, some of which were people that I really admire, some of which were people that I knew nothing about before going to their show. Some were genres that I wouldn't normally have gone for. But the beautiful thing about Fest, particularly Edinburgh, is you can just take a chance on something.
Yeah.
See it for an hour. Maybe you'll love it. Maybe you won't. I only saw a couple shows this year that I didn't really think were fun and worth my time. But you get to see comedians from all over the world and to be in an atmosphere that is so incredibly supportive and mostly supportive. And there's a couple standouts that were the opposite of that. But mostly where you've got a lot of goodwill from other performers, from other acts, and from the audience who have sought out comedy because they want to laugh. I love it so much. I feel like Edinburgh particularly feels like you're on a university campus, but the university specializes in comedy. You can't walk down the street and see, Nish Kumar and have a quick chat.
Yeah.
Like, come on, where do you get to do that? It's so cool.
So you've done your first solo show, but you've also obviously you MC your own night, and you like you say you've done all these turns on other mixed bills. Where are you most comfortable at this point? Doing your full show or running the night, or do you want to be part of a group of people putting on a mixed bill? Where do you sit most comfortably?
That's a really good question. And I don't know because I love doing my show. And it wasn't like any, I did a split bill last year where I was doing 20 minutes every day, but doing a full hour where you're the only person in the room is different.
Yeah.
And I loved it mostly. And I love emceeing, and emceeing is great because it forces me out of my comfort zone because I'm the kind of comic, I plan what I'm going to say. Sorry, peek behind the curtain. I write almost everything, and I don't deliver it necessarily verbatim, but I put a lot of thought into the wording. And if there's a key phrase that needs to be delivered a certain way, then I will mostly do that every night. And when I don't, it doesn't get the laugh it needs. So, but emceeing allows me to improvise. It requires you to improvise a lot more. And that's good for me as a performer.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. And I enjoy booking acts for my night because it gives me the ability to create the kind of show that I would want to perform at. So my night is mixed experience. So we'll have a pro headliner and we'll have somebody possibly doing their first ever 5-minute set. And I tried to create this like really supportive environment where the audience has a great time and the performers have a great time. And I wish more shows would do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not slamming anyone in particular, but it's disheartening when you see lineups that are, 5 people who tick all the same demographic boxes, and they're the same people who get booked by the same promoters week after week and month after month. And you go, how come you don't book female performers? And they go, oh, females don't apply. And you're like, we do though. So, and I don't know. There are plenty of people who are funnier than me. There's plenty of people who aren't as funny as me, I dare say, but it's frustrating when every promoter has their sort of favorites who they go to, and I get that because you want to have people you can rely on.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think it's important to have diverse bills, and not just diversity of gender or gender identity or sexuality, but age.
Mhm.
I was once told by a promoter, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't book you because I already have a woman of a similar generation on the bill." And can you imagine any promoter saying the same thing to a man?
No, not at all.
Sorry, we've got another white guy in his 30s. Can't possibly have you on. What? It doesn't make any sense. But like diversity of styles as well. So I'll have musical comics on and stand-ups and absurdists. And
Yeah,
if I think somebody's funny, I'm happy to book them.
yeah.
Like that's genuinely my criteria. Are you funny? Great, let's have you on. Um, I don't know if every promoter does that. But that wasn't what you asked me. You asked me where I'm most comfortable. So
Mm,
I wear a few different hats. So I
sure.
love doing my hour show,
Yeah.
and I'm already planning my next hour show for next year.
Mm,
And I love emceeing because it pushes me out of my comfort zone. It helps me to think more on my feet, be more present in the moment, which is always when the magic happens.
yeah.
And I love doing, shorter sets, 10 minutes, 15, 20, whatever,
Yeah.
all around the country. I love that. You go on, you're present in the moment, you have a great time. People are laughing, they're engaging, and you spend the rest of your evening seeing other acts being funny. Like, what's not to like?
Yeah.
Great.
So you mentioned there about working on your second show. So when you've built up to your first hour, you've got a specific things that you want to talk about. You spent potentially years working on that first hour. How do you approach a second show? I know it's early days. We've just come out of the Fringe, but where do you go?
I don't know what anyone else does, but there's a couple bits that I've had that I've done in the last year or two that I really enjoyed and that seemed to get decent reactions from audiences.
Mm,
And they didn't make it into this year's show because they didn't fit the themes,
right.
right? Just I could have written a much, much longer show, but nobody would have come. And crucially, nobody would have laughed because it would have been way too much. So, so there's some other things that I want to talk about. It's kind of related to the material that was in the first show, but there's some other things I want to talk about. And I've been thinking about them for a while and what joins them together.
Mm,
So where the narrative theme is. I haven't written the new show. I have the title.
mhm,
I have a general idea of the topics I'm going to cover.
mhm.
I've got a couple bits that are going to be in it, but I don't know yet what the arc is going to be, what the story is going to be that underpins it.
Yeah.
I have some ideas, but I think that's decent for the stage. The first outing of the new show is going to be at Leicester on the 22nd of February. I just agreed the date yesterday.
Mhm.
And that gives me 173 days to write my next show. But I have a lot I want to say.
Yeah.
And maybe ironically, one of the hardest things for me to learn as a comic is to say things in a shorter amount of words.
Yeah.
Because as you have already seen this evening, I'm a bit verbose.
Is there any standout lessons that you've picked up or philosophies that you've formed that have that inform how you go forward
From Edinburgh specifically or just generally?
from wherever, from your experience?
Oh, so much. I think if you have the opportunity to be kind, be kind.
Mm,
Not comedy specific, but just generally. I'm just thinking about like in Edinburgh, I didn't have a lot in the way of reviews, but I had two publications that came to review and both gave me 4 stars, which was lovely, and I was very excited about it.
mhm,
And the first day that I got that first review, and I went and printed off some stars and put them on my flyers, and I was so excited, like a little kid.
mhm.
And I saw this comic who I know, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Great, I just got 4 stars." And he asked me who I got 4 stars from. And I said, Jewish Renaissance magazine, which granted, not one of the big players, but okay.
Mhm.
And his immediate response was, "How much did you pay him?"
Mm.
Which is a king asshole comment,
Mm.
but also uncomfortably in the possibly anti-Semitic realm. Just that link between money and anything, any mention of Jewish thing, and his first thought is money. And I'm like,
Mm.
you're a cunt. Um, and it was clearly sour grapes on his part. And I mean, think it, fine, do what you want, but don't say it.
Yeah.
Every other person I spoke to and shared my good news I was so excited about was like, great job, congratulations, that's awesome, amazing. This asshole just wanted to push me down because he was feeling a bit shit about himself, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was unnecessary. And the fact that I'm still thinking about it 3 weeks later says a lot. But, you know, and he did, a couple hours later, he sent me an apology on Facebook, which seemed sincere, I guess. But when he saw me in person the next day, he said nothing. So I think if people show you who you really are, believe them. That's that lesson. But I think generally, I believe that as comedians, if we lift each other up, together we rise. Right? That is not just comedians, like everyone. I think generally, together we rise. You know, there's all these communities there's WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups and all these communities of comedians, and some are really positive and are around this idea of lift each other up, and some just a boatload of cunts.
Is that the title of your new Edinburgh show?
It might be. It's not. Maybe it should be. There's some shows that only book a few times a year, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to kind of be in the know for when to apply for these things. And yesterday was one such day. And I put a note in a group like, hey guys, it's today. Go to this and apply for this. And somebody else messaged me and was like, why are you sharing that? That just means more people applying for the same spots as you. I'm like, yeah. And if I'm good, I'll get the spot. And if I won't, then somebody else who is good will get it. So fair enough.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I've learned. I think I knew that already, but it's helped solidify that in my brain. But I think just, I don't know. You're asking for big life lessons, and I'm not sure I'm the kind of guru that can any of them. I just think be your authentic self, whoever that is, as long as it's not part of a boatload of cunts, you're fine.
I need to get that t-shirt with that on it.
Oh my God. I mean, the possibilities are endless.
Oh yeah.
I feel like Redbubble needs this.
So then tell me this, what so far have been your best and worst experiences in comedy?
My best is just the whole thing has been a net positive for me. Like I'm so much happier as a person, just generally being able to be creative for the first time in my life and feel like I have a voice that some people enjoy. Here, not my physical voice, obviously lots of people love that. But having a voice for the inner monologue that never shuts up and being able to put some focus around that has been really positive for me. And as for negative, I think it does feel like fighting an uphill battle sometimes. There are still people in this world who think women aren't funny. There are still people in this world who don't want to hear a woman who is older talk about sex. Because I don't know, I don't understand why. But I fit in that category. I'm ever so slightly older. And I do talk about sex.
Scandal.
Human. And sex is good. But no, I mean, I think I've had a few sort of long, dark nights of the soul where you just think, God, I'm not funny, and what am I even doing? And imposter syndrome is a very, very, very real thing that every comedian deals with, I think.
Yeah.
And it's resilience building to keep going. And I think I've learned a lot from listening to lots of good podcasts, obviously yours, but also like Stuart Goldsmith's Comedian, Sarah Millican's rule, which I think every comedian uses about not, focusing too long on your big highs or big lows.
Yeah.
But I think it's just really important to be your authentic self, to give yourself a voice if that's what you want in your life, and not be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
That's fun. And I think there's some nights that do that really well. So like ACMS, the Alternative Comedy Memorial Society, every single act comes off stage and the hosts and the audience all say, a failure, a noble failure. And it's a beautiful thing. It is the feeling in the room every single time I've been to an ACMS is of acceptance and pushing each other to be better and to be more creative and to be different, to think differently and try different things. And that is a force for good in the world, and we need more of that, please.
So tell me about the night that you host.
Oh, is this the part where I get to promote my night?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. I put on a night in London called Sofa So Funny. It's at the Angelic and Angel, and it's twice a month, but we are starting to expand. What? It's so exciting. We're going to be on every Tuesday under the heading of So Funny Tuesdays. But because I can't do every week, because I'm also a gigging comedian, and also, by the way, I still have a day job. I know. My good friend Jacob Hatton, who's a fantastic comedian, he's doing 2 nights a month, 2 Tuesdays a month. So he's on the first and third Tuesday every month is going to be called What's So Funny, and it's going to be Jacob running the night, and it's going to be to similar spec as Sofa So Funny. So we've got mixed experience comedians, we've got fantastic pro headliner, we've got really friendly atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's the hallmark. And I'll be running Sofa So Funny on the second and fourth Tuesday every month, and in the odd month where there's a 5th Tuesday, we'll have the lovely Nick Kirk, also a very talented comedian, running So Odd So Funny, which will slant towards the alternative side of comedy. So the first one of those is at the end of October, and we're really excited about that. And we're hoping by having comedy in the same place every Tuesday that we can encourage more people to come along, take a punt. The tickets are the cost of a pint of beer, £6 for a ticket, and you get 2 hours worth of laughter. I mean, that's hard to beat in London, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, if anyone wants to check us out, they should come along to the Angelic any Tuesday, or they can look at Sofa So Funny. If you I know it's a stupid name, by the way, I'm aware of that. However, if you Google it, you will find us. So it's sofa like the couch you sit on, so funny, all one word.
So how can we find out about you and where we can come and see you performing, apart from Sofa So Funny?
Well, my link tree is probably the best place to go, or Instagram. I still use Twitter for some reason. Somebody's got to. But it's Linktree/Leslie Gold, and I've got my gig diary on there, so you can always see within a few days where I'm going to be gigging. So my full gig diary is always up there. And I gig all over, mostly in London because I live in London, but I do get around a bit, as has been said of me. I'm really excited because I've got 3 more performances of my Edinburgh show in October. Because people kept saying to me, oh, you're going to do it in London. So I am twice. So on October 13th, I'm going to be at the Penn Theatre in Peckham as part of their Fresh Off the Fringe program, which I'm very excited about. And then on the 18th of October, I'm at Faversham Fringe, which is like the friendliest little fringe. I love it. And then on the 24th of October, I'm doing a double feature with the wonderful Pauline Eyre at Aces and Eights. We're both doing our Edinburgh shows there on the 24th of October. So details for all those ticket links will be on my link tree, which you can get to from my Instagram, as soon as ticket links are available. On the 8th of October, there is a Sofa So Funny, but Nick will be hosting in my absence because I will be at the Comedy Store crying, because every year I host a charity night for a really lovely charity called The Passage that helps people dealing with homelessness. And we have a fantastic night. It's sold out the last 2 years. We have Dara O'Brien headlining, which is incredible. He's so funny and so lovely. And this year we've also got, I'm trying to think who's been announced. There's a couple people who haven't been announced yet. We've also got Mark Thomas, Jess Foster-Q, and Nabil Abdul Rashid, plus 1 or 2 more to be announced. And that is all for a really good cause. And you can find tickets either on the Comedy Store website or by searching The Passage Charity. And there's a link to that on my link tree as well. But please support it. It's a really important cause. It's a fantastic night. And I'm just always so honored to be part of it. It's an incredible night for a really good cause.
Yeah. So my last question then, Leslie, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
I knew you were going to ask me this. It's right there right there in the name of the podcast. I'll go back to what I said earlier. Like in life, you've always got a choice of how you react to things.
Yeah.
You can laugh or you can cry. And for me, it's laughter every time, in whatever form that takes for whoever. Give me laughter.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.